I never thought giving my professor a ride home in the rain would lead to me standing in front of the university ethics committee 6 months later, watching my entire future collapse, because I couldn't stop myself from falling in love with her. But let me take you back to where it started. Before the hearings, before the whispers in the hallways, before I had to choose between my degree and the woman who made me feel alive for the first time in my 29 years. My name is Jake Morrison, 29 years old, graduate student in urban planning at the University of Colorado, Denver. Most people ask why I'm still in school at my age. The truth? I spent my 20s chasing the wrong things. After undergrad, I dove straight into corporate consulting, wore the suits, worked the 80-hour weeks, got engaged to Rebecca, a perfectly nice woman who wanted the same perfectly nice life I thought I wanted. But somewhere around year 7, I woke up in a hotel room in Phoenix and couldn't remember which city I was supposed to be in. Couldn't remember the last conversation I'd had with Rebecca that wasn't about logistics. Couldn't remember the last time I felt like I was living instead of just existing. Rebecca left me 8 months before I quit my job. Said I was emotionally unavailable. She was right. I had optimized my life for efficiency and completely forgotten to include joy in the equation. So at 28, I did something reckless. I applied to grad school, moved to Denver, told myself I'd figure out who I actually was instead of who I thought I should be. That's how I ended up in Professor Claire Donovan's Sustainable Urban Design seminar on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. Professor Donovan was a legend in the program. 46 years old, 15 years of experience as a practicing architect before transitioning to academia. She had designed 3 LEED Platinum buildings, consulted for the mayor's office on affordable housing, and had a reputation for being brilliant, demanding, and completely uninterested in hand-holding students who couldn't keep up. I loved her class immediately. Not because of her, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice her. Dark hair with silver streaks she wore in a perpetual messy bun. Sharp green eyes that could dismantle a weak argument in seconds. She dressed like someone who had nothing to prove. Tailored blazers over vintage band t-shirts, boots that had actually seen construction sites, minimal jewelry, except for a silver ring on her right hand. But what captivated me was the way she thought. She didn't just teach design principles, she taught philosophy. How spaces shape human behavior. How architecture can either reinforce inequality or dismantle it. How a building is never just a building. It's a political statement, a social contract, a frozen moment of someone's values. I found myself staying after class to argue with her, not to challenge, but to understand. She seemed to appreciate it, or at least tolerate it. "You think differently than most of my students, Jake," she said one evening as we stood by her desk, the classroom emptying around us. "You're not trying to impress me. You're actually trying to learn." "Maybe because I wasted a decade not learning anything that mattered," I said. She studied me for a moment, her head tilted. "You're not wasted. You're just late to the party." Then she smiled, this small, private thing that felt like a secret shared between us. "But you're here now? That counts?" That was the first time I felt it. Not attraction, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. Like she could see the parts of me I'd spent years hiding. 3 weeks later, the rain started. Colorado storms are violent and brief. This one came out of nowhere at 8:47 p.m., right as Professor Donovan dismissed class. Within minutes, the sky opened up, sheets of water hammering the windows. Most students ran for the parking garage. I hung back, checking my phone. That's when I noticed her standing at the window, arms crossed, watching the storm with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Professor Donovan?" I said, approaching carefully. "You okay?" She glanced at me, then smiled ruefully. "I biked today. Clearly a tactical error." "You bike in October?" "I bike in every month. It's good for the environment and terrible for my hair." She gestured at the storm. "Though this might be the universe telling me to invest in a car, I made the decision before I could overthink it. I'll drive you." She turned to look at me fully, one eyebrow raised. "Jake, you don't have to. I know. But I'm offering." For a moment, I thought she'd say no. Professors weren't supposed to accept rides from students. It blurred lines, created complications. But then she sighed, grabbed her bag, and said, "All right. But if this turns into a serial killer situation, I'm giving you a failing grade posthumously." I laughed. Fair. My car was a 10-year-old Honda Civic, with a broken CD player, and a back seat full of textbooks. Not impressive. But it was dry. Professor Donovan gave me her address, a neighborhood in Capitol Hill, about 20 minutes away. We drove in silence for the first few minutes, the rain drumming on the roof, the wipers working overtime. "Thank you for this," she said finally. "I know it's out of your way." "It's not," I lied. It was completely out of my way. I lived in the opposite direction. She gave me a look that said she knew I was lying but appreciated it anyway. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Depends on the question." "Why teaching? You had a successful firm? You were building real things? Why give that up for grad students who half the time don't do the reading?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because buildings don't change unless the people designing them change. I can design one great building, or I can teach 50 students who each go on to design dozens. It's exponential impact." That's a very optimistic view of academia. It is. And some days, I think I'm an idiot for believing it. She turned to look at me, her face half lit by the dashboard glow. "But then I get a student like you, who actually cares, and I remember why I do this." My throat tightened. "I'm not that special." "You are. You just don't know it yet." The way she said it, not as flattery, but as fact, made something crack open in my chest. We pulled up to her house 15 minutes later. It was a small craftsman bungalow with a sagging porch and overgrown garden, charming in a neglected way. "Home sweet home," she said, reaching for the door handle. Then the lightning struck. Not metaphorically. Actual lightning, hitting a transformer 2 blocks away. The streetlights went out. The porch light that had been glowing through the rain went dark. "Shit," Claire muttered. First time she'd cursed in front of me. First time she felt like a person instead of a professor. "Power's out," I said, stating the obvious. She sat back in her seat, running a hand through her damp hair. "Of course it is. Do you have candles? Flashlight? Probably. Somewhere. If I can find them in the dark?" She sighed, then turned to me. "Jake, I know this is going to sound, do you want me to come in and help?" I asked. She looked at me for a long, waited moment. Later, I'd realized this was the moment. The fork in the road. The place where we both knew what we were doing and did it anyway. "Just to dry off," she said. "And help me find the candles. Then you should go." Okay. We both knew I wasn't going anywhere. Her house smelled like old books and jasmine. I couldn't see much in the dark, just shapes, the outline of furniture, the faint glow of her phone flashlight as she rummaged through kitchen drawers. "Found them," she said, producing a handful of tea lights and a lighter. She set them on the coffee table, and the small flames cast flickering shadows across the living room. It was beautiful, in a bohemian, slightly chaotic way. Bookshelves crammed with design theory and novels. A drafting table by the window covered in sketches. Plants everywhere, some thriving, some barely surviving. Art on the walls, real art, not IKEA prints. "This is very you," I said. She looked around, as if seeing it through my eyes. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Definitely a compliment." "Good." She handed me a towel. "You're soaked. Dry off before you drip all over my floor." I rubbed the towel through my hair, hyper-aware of her watching me. She'd taken off her blazer, revealing a faded Radiohead t-shirt underneath. Her hair was down now, damp and curling at the ends. She looked younger, more real. "Do you want coffee?" she asked. "I have a gas stove, so I can actually make it." "Sure." I followed her into the kitchen. It was small, cozy, the kind of space designed for one person. We stood too close as she filled the kettle, our shoulders almost brushing. "Jake?" she said quietly, not looking at me. "Yeah? This is okay, right? You being here, it's not weird." "Why would it be weird?" "Because I'm your professor. Because there are rules about this kind of thing. We're making coffee. I think the ethics committee will survive." She laughed, but it was nervous. "Right. Coffee." The kettle began to whistle. She poured water over the grounds, the smell rich and comforting. We stood there in the candlelight, holding our mugs, not drinking. "I should tell you something," she said. "Okay, I'm divorced. 3 years now. No drama, we just grew into different people. My daughter's in New York, finishing grad school, and I'm here, teaching 20-year-olds about green roofs and wondering what the hell I'm doing with my life." "You're 46, I said. Not dead, she smiled. Sometimes it feels the same. I get that. Do you? She turned to face me fully, her eyes searching. You're 29. You have your whole life ahead of you. I spent most of it sleepwalking. I'm just starting to wake up. And what woke you up? You. I wanted to say. Standing in front of a lecture hall talking about beauty and function like they're the same thing. The way you argue with me like I'm an equal instead of a student. The way you look at me sometimes, like maybe you feel it too. But instead, I said, I'm still figuring that out. She held my gaze for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, then she turned away. You should probably go. The rain's letting up. It wasn't. But I nodded anyway. I stood at her door, dripping rainwater onto her welcome mat, neither of us moving. The candles behind us threw dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the rain had softened to a steady drum, the kind that makes you want to stay inside, to stay warm, to stay close to another human being. Jake, she said softly, her hand on the doorknob. Thank you. For the ride. For the company. Anytime. She looked up at me then, and something shifted in her expression. A crack in the armor. I mean it. Like what? Where I feel like myself instead of Professor Donovan. Where someone sees me as more than just the person grading their papers. My chest tightened. I always see you as more than that. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's what scares me. The air between us was charged, electric. I could smell her perfume jasmine and something darker, earthier. Could see the pulse beating in her throat. Could feel the heat radiating off her skin even though we weren't touching. This was the moment. The place where I should say goodnight, walk away, maintain the boundaries that kept both our worlds intact. Instead, I said, what if I don't want you to be scared? Then, you're not thinking clearly. Maybe I'm tired of thinking clearly. She closed her eyes, her hand tightening on the doorknob. Jake, if you don't leave right now, what? What happens if I don't leave? She opened her eyes, and they were full of want and fear and something that looked like surrender. Then we cross a line we can't uncross. Maybe I want to cross it. You don't know what you're saying? I know exactly what I'm saying. For a long moment, we just stood there, trembling on the edge of something irrevocable. Then she let go of the doorknob. Stay, she whispered. Just stay. I stayed. I didn't go to her office hours for 2 weeks after that night. Not because I didn't want to. Because I did. Because every time I sat in her class, watching her pace in front of the whiteboard, gesturing with her dry erase marker, I thought about her kitchen, her laugh, the way she'd looked at me in the candlelight, the way she'd kissed me against her door at 2 a.m., desperate and tender and terrified all at once. This is wrong, I told myself. She's your professor. There are rules, boundaries, very good reasons for those boundaries. But then she'd say something brilliant, or challenge someone's lazy thinking, or catch my eye across the room, and I'd forget every single reason this was a bad idea. The guilt was a living thing. It sat in my chest during every lecture, whispered in my ear every time I opened my laptop to work on her assignments. Was she grading me fairly? Would anyone believe she was? Did it matter that I'd been earning A's long before that rainy night? Or would people assume I'd seduced my way to a good GPA? And worse, was I using her? Was I so desperate for validation, for connection, that I'd put her entire career at risk just to feel something? I couldn't answer that. So, I avoided her. On Thursday of week 3, she stopped me after class. Jake, walk with me. It wasn't a request. We walked across campus in silence, past the library, past the student union, until we reached the architecture building's rooftop terrace deserted at 9 p.m. The Denver skyline glittered in the distance, 1,000 lights against the dark. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the city. You're avoiding me, she said finally. I'm not. You are. You haven't come to office hours. You sit in the back of class now instead of the front. You leave before I can talk to you. She turned to face me, and her eyes were tired. Sad. Did I do something wrong? No. God, no. Then what? I couldn't lie to her. I'm trying to maintain boundaries. Because you're my professor, Claire. She flinched at the use of her first name. Professor Donovan? See? That. I can't. I ran a hand through my hair. Frustrated. I can't keep pretending that night didn't happen. Nothing happened that night. didn't it? The air between us was electric. She was gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were white. Jake, she said, her voice low and strained. You're a student. I'm faculty. There are policies. If anyone found out I invited you into my home, did you want me there? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. She closed her eyes, and I saw her jaw clench. This can't happen. What can't happen? This. Whatever you're thinking, whatever I'm thinking. She opened her eyes, and there was real fear in them. Raw and undisguised. I could lose my job. You could lose your degree. And for what? A few weeks of feeling something before reality crashes down? You think that's all this is? I don't know what this is. That's the problem. Her voice cracked, and suddenly she wasn't Professor Donovan anymore. She was just Claire. 46 and scared and so tired of pretending. I'm 46 years old, Jake. I've been divorced. I've raised a kid. I've built a career from nothing. And you're brilliant and kind, and you look at me like I'm not just some middle-aged professor marking time until retirement, and that terrifies me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Why does it terrify you? Because I want to kiss you right now, she whispered. We stood there, 3 feet apart, the city glittering below us, both of us trembling with the effort of not closing the distance. The cold October air bit through my jacket. Somewhere below, students were laughing, living their uncomplicated lives. Up here, the world had narrowed to just the two of us, and the impossible space between. Then don't, I said finally. She looked up at me, eyes wide and wet with unshed tears. Don't kiss me. Not tonight. Not until you're sure. And if I'm never sure, then I'll deal with it. I forced myself to step back, to put more distance between us even though every cell in my body was screaming to move closer. But don't ask me to stop caring. I can't do that. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Vulnerable. You should go. Claire. Please. Jake. Her voice broke. Please just go. So I did. I walked away from her on that rooftop, my hands shaking, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. I walked across campus, got in my car, drove home, and sat in my dark apartment wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The university sent 6 of us to the National Urban Design Conference in Chicago 3 weeks later. Graduate students, faculty, a whole cohort. Professor Donovan was leading the group. We barely spoke during the flights. The panels, the networking events. She was professional, distant, the perfect academic supervisor. When she gave feedback on our presentation drafts, her notes for me were thorough and fair and completely impersonal. It was killing me. By the second night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went down to the hotel bar at midnight, ordered a whiskey I didn't want, and tried to convince myself this was for the best. That distance was good, that we were doing the right thing. That's when I saw her. She was tucked into a corner booth, nursing what looked like her second or third drink, staring at her phone with an expression of pure exhaustion. I should have stayed at the bar, should have finished my drink and gone to bed. Instead, I walked over. Everything okay? I asked. She looked up, surprised. For a moment, I thought she'd tell me to leave, but then her shoulders sagged, and she just looked tired. My daughter, she said quietly. She's struggling. Grad school pressure, anxiety. She called me crying an hour ago, and I can't. Her voice caught. I can't help from here. Want to talk about it? Not really. She gestured to the empty seat across from her. But you can sit if you want. I sat, signaled the bartender for another round. We sat in silence for a long time. The bar was nearly empty, just a few other conference attendees. Tired travelers. The bartender wiping down glasses with mechanical efficiency. I'm a terrible mother, Claire said finally, staring into her glass. I doubt that. I chose career over proximity. She's in New York, I'm in Denver. I tell myself it's because I'm respecting her independence, but really, I was just running away from my failed marriage and the empty house that reminded me of it. You're allowed to have your own life, Claire. Am I? She turned to look at me, her eyes glassy with alcohol and emotion. Or am I supposed to be available 24/7 for everyone else's needs while mine don't matter? Your needs matter. Do they? Because every time I think about what I want, she stopped abruptly, shaking her head. Never mind. Say it. Jake. Say it. She took a long drink, then set down her glass with deliberate care. Every time I think about what I want, it's something completely inappropriate that would blow up my entire life. The air shifted. Charged. Like what? I asked quietly, even though I already knew. She looked at me, and there was no hiding it anymore. The want, the ache, the impossible pull between us that we'd been fighting for months. Like you, she whispered. My heart stopped. Started again, double time. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. She didn't pull away, just stared at our joined hands like she couldn't quite believe they were real. Room 847, she said, so quietly I almost missed it. If you change your mind in the next 30 seconds, walk away. If you don't, she looked up at me, and her eyes were dark with want and fear and desperate hope. Meet me there in 10 minutes. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and left. I sat there, my hand still warm from where it had touched hers, my heart racing, every rational thought screaming at me to stay in the bar, finish my drink, go to my own room. This is wrong. She could lose her job. You could lose your degree. This is selfish and reckless, and you're going to ruin her life. I counted to 60. Then I followed her. She opened the door on the first knock. We didn't say anything. She pulled me inside, and I kissed her before the door even closed. Before I could think. Before I could talk myself out of it. It was desperate. Hungry. Months of restraint, shattering all at once. She tasted like whiskey and regret and something sweeter underneath. Her hands fisted in my shirt, pulling me closer. And I backed her against the wall. My hands in her hair. Her breath coming in short gasps against my mouth. Jake, she whispered when we broke apart, her forehead pressed to mine. We can't. We are. This is insane. I know. I could lose everything. So could I. She looked up at me, and tears were streaming down her face. Then why are we doing this? Because I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between us. Irrevocable. She closed her eyes, more tears slipping free. You can't be. Too late. You don't even know me. I know you care more about your students than your salary. I know you bike to campus even in the rain because you actually believe individual choices matter. I know you call your daughter every Sunday even though half the time she doesn't pick up. I know you pretend to be tough but you cry at documentaries about climate change. I know you drink your coffee black but you put honey in your tea. I know you're scared of failing but more scared of never trying. How do you know that last one? Because I feel the same way. She laughed, broken and watery. You remember all that? I remember everything about you. She kissed me again, softer this time. Tender. Like she was trying to memorize the shape of my mouth, the taste of my breath, the feeling of my hands on her skin. I love you too, she whispered against my lips. And that's the most selfish thing I've ever said. I'm not going to tell you everything that happened that night. Some things are ours alone. But I'll tell you this. She was beautiful. Not in spite of the lines around her eyes or the silver in her hair, but because of them. Every mark on her skin was a story, a divorce survived, a daughter raised, a career built from scratch, 1,000 small battles fought and won, and she let me read them all. She was hesitant at first, self-conscious in a way that broke my heart. 46 years of being told by the world that women have an expiration date, that youth is the only currency that matters. Hey, I whispered, catching her hands as she tried to cover herself. Look at me. She did, reluctantly. You're beautiful. Jake. Not for your age, not in spite of anything. Just beautiful. You. She kissed me then, and it was different. Softer. Like she was letting herself believe it. We made love slowly, carefully, like we were both afraid the other might shatter. And when she fell asleep in my arms at 3 a.m., her head on my chest, her breathing slow and even, her hand curled over my heart, I thought, this is worth it. Whatever happens next, this moment is worth it. I was so incredibly wrong. A teaching assistant saw us having breakfast together the next morning. We weren't touching, weren't sitting too close. We'd been careful, professional, two colleagues grabbing coffee before the morning panels. But there must have been something in the way we looked at each other, something we couldn't hide. A tenderness in Claire's eyes when she handed me the sugar. A softness in my voice when I asked if she wanted another coffee. The invisible thread connecting us, visible to anyone who cared to look. The T.A. Marcus Chen, a second-year student I'd met once at a departmental mixer, looked at us for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked away. I didn't think anything of it at the time. 2 weeks after we got back to Denver, Claire was called into the dean's office. Someone had filed a complaint, anonymous, alleging inappropriate conduct between a faculty member and a student. Potential violation of the university's fraternization policy. Possible abuse of power dynamics. They were launching an investigation. Claire called me from her car, crying so hard she could barely speak. Jake, they know. Someone saw us, or guessed, or I don't know, but they're investigating. They've put me on administrative leave pending the outcome. My blood went cold. What does that mean? It means I can't teach. Can't advise students. Can't come to campus except for the investigation meetings. It means my entire career is under a microscope. Because I fell in love with you. Claire, they're going to fire me. Her voice was hollow, defeated. Even if they can't prove anything happened before Chicago, the optics are too bad. A professor and her graduate student. It doesn't matter that you're 29, not 19. It doesn't matter that I never graded your work. Someone else handled all my grading this semester specifically because I wanted to be careful. All that matters is the appearance of impropriety. I'll withdraw, I said immediately. I'll leave the program. I'll tell them it was all me. That I pursued you. That you tried to maintain boundaries. No. Her voice was suddenly fierce. You are not sacrificing your future for me. You're sacrificing yours for me. I'm 46, Jake. I can get another job. Consulting. Private practice. Something. You can't get these years back. You can't rebuild your degree if you throw it away now. I don't care about the degree. Well, I do. She was crying harder now. I care that you went back to school because you wanted to do something meaningful. I care that you're brilliant and passionate and you could actually change things if you finish. I care that if you throw this away from me, you'll resent me eventually. Maybe not now. Maybe not next year. But someday. That's not true. You don't know that. We fought about it for hours. On the phone, then in person, when she showed up at my apartment at midnight, her eyes red and swollen, her hair a mess, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Both of us trying to fall on the sword. Both of us refusing to let the other do it. I'll tell them the truth, I said finally. That we fell in love? That it was mutual? That you never used your position to pressure me? The truth has to count for something. She laughed bitterly. You're so young. What's that supposed to mean? It means the truth doesn't matter, Jake. Only the narrative. And the narrative is, older female professor seduces vulnerable male student. Never mind that you're nearly 30. Never mind that I tried to maintain boundaries. Never mind that we're both adults who made a choice. The university needs someone to blame, and it's not going to be the student. So what do? She looked at me with eyes full of grief and love and resignation. We survive it. Separately. Jake. I said no. I pulled her close, even though she tried to resist. We survive it together. Or not at all. She buried her face in my chest and sobbed. The investigation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of Claire in administrative exile, reviewing grant applications and scheduling meetings for professors who whispered about her in the hallways. 6 weeks of me attending classes under a different advisor, avoiding eye contact with former classmates who now looked at me like I was a scandal instead of a person. 6 weeks of stolen moments, late-night phone calls, coffee in anonymous cafes 3 towns over, one desperate weekend at a hotel in Colorado Springs where we barely left the room. 6 weeks of loving each other and hating what that love was costing. The ethics committee's ruling came down on a gray Tuesday in March. Professor Claire Donovan was found to have exercised poor judgment but not to have violated any specific policies, as the relationship had not begun until after I was no longer enrolled in her courses. However, to preserve the integrity of the academic environment, she was being reassigned to administrative duties indefinitely. No more teaching. No more students. Just paperwork and bureaucracy until she decided to leave. I was cleared of any wrongdoing, allowed to continue my degree, but I had to switch advisors permanently and could never take another course from Professor Donovan. We were allowed to exist, just not together, not in any way that mattered. The day the ruling came down, Claire cleaned out her office. 16 years of books, articles, student projects, awards, memories packed into boxes and loaded into her car. I helped her carry them. We didn't talk. There was nothing left to say. When the last box was loaded, she turned to me in the empty parking lot, and her eyes were dry, hard. "You should stay away from me," she said. "For your own good. Finish your degree. Build your career. Find someone your own age, who doesn't come with all this baggage." "Claire, I mean it, Jake. This is your chance to walk away clean. Take it. What if I don't want to?" She smiled, sad and bitter. "Then you're a fool." She got in her car and drove away. I stood there in the parking lot, watching her taillights disappear, and wondered if this was how love was supposed to feel, like losing and winning at the same time. We see each other once a week now, coffee shops far from campus, where no one knows us. Lunch at restaurants in suburbs where the university's reach doesn't extend. Her apartment on Wednesday nights when I can get away. My place on weekends when she doesn't have to pretend to be anywhere else. We don't hide, exactly. But we don't advertise. Her daughter knows. Emma flew out last month, insisted on meeting me face to face. She sat across from me at Claire's kitchen table, arms crossed, eyes hard. "Are you using my mom for a grade?" she asked bluntly. "I'd withdraw tomorrow if it would help her," I told her. "I love her. Not because she's my professor, she's not anymore. Not because it's convenient, it's the opposite of convenient. I love her because she makes me want to be better than I am." Emma studied me for a long time. Then she said, quietly, "She seems happy." I haven't seen her happy in years. It's not perfect. Claire lost the job she loved. She spends her days reviewing grant applications, scheduling faculty meetings, doing administrative work that doesn't feed her soul. She applies to jobs every week, design firms, consulting groups, anything that will let her build again instead of just pushing paper. But her name is tainted now. The rumors have spread. The professor who slept with her student. Never mind the nuance. Never mind the truth. I'm finishing my degree under a different advisor. Dr. Reynolds is competent, thorough, perfectly fine. But he doesn't challenge me the way Claire did. Doesn't push me to think bigger, dream harder, question everything. My thesis is good. It'll be good enough to graduate, but it's not what it could have been. Some colleagues won't make eye contact with Claire. Some students look at me like I'm a cautionary tale. We get stares when we're seen together. Whispers. The occasional nasty comment from strangers who think they have the right to judge. Last week, someone keyed homewrecker into the side of Claire's car. She cried for an hour. Then she called her insurance company and made an appointment to get it fixed. "I'm sorry," I said, holding her while she shook. "This is my fault." "No," she said fiercely. "It's the fault of people who think they own other people's lives. But here's what else is true. Claire got an offer last week. A design firm in Portland. Small but prestigious. Green building specialists. Great salary. Creative freedom. A fresh start away from Denver and all its ghosts. It's perfect," she said, showing me the email on her phone. We were sitting on her couch, my arm around her shoulders, her head on my chest. "They don't care about the scandal. They care about my portfolio. That's amazing. Jake." She sat up, turning to look at me. "Portland is 1,200 miles away. I know. You're still 6 months from finishing your degree. You can't transfer now. And even after you graduate, your job prospects are here, where you've built connections, where your advisor has a network. I'll figure it out. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Jake, be realistic. Long distance for 6 months, maybe a year if you can't find work right away. That's not sustainable. And I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't be the reason you give up everything you've worked for. You're not. You'd be the reason I keep working for it." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You're going to regret me someday." "Never. You don't know that. I know I regret nothing so far. Not the investigation. Not the scandal. Not losing you as my professor. Because I gained you as everything else." She kissed me then, salt sweet with tears, and whispered, "What if it doesn't work? What if it does?" She took the job. I'll finish my degree remotely in the spring. Move to Portland in June. Figure out the rest as I go. It's not the plan I had. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the best things in life aren't planned. Maybe they're the reckless, terrifying, beautiful mistakes that crack you open and rebuild you into someone better. My advisor thinks I'm insane. My parents are concerned. My ex-fiancée, when she found out through mutual friends, sent me a text. Still running away from real commitment? I see. But Emma sent me a message last night. Take care of my mom. She deserves to be happy, even if it's complicated. Especially because it's complicated. This morning, I woke up in Claire's bed, early light filtering through the curtains. She was still asleep. Her hair spread across the pillow, one hand curled under her cheek, 46 years old and beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with youth and everything to do with survival. I thought about the cost, her career derailed, my reputation compromised, the whispers that will follow us for years, the distance ahead, the uncertainty of whether this can survive outside the bubble of forbidden attraction, and I thought, worth it. She stirred, opened her eyes, found me watching her. Morning. Trouble? She murmured, her voice rough with sleep. Morning? What are you thinking about? You? Us. The fact that love doesn't care about your plans or your career or your carefully constructed boundaries. The fact that sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose the person who makes you feel alive, even if it costs you everything else. But I just smiled and said, Portland? I think I'll like Portland. She smiled back, and it was real. Unguarded. The smile of someone who's stopped fighting what she feels. Me too. We don't know if this will work. Long distance, career rebuilding. The weight of everything we've sacrificed pressing down on us. We don't know if the love we feel now will survive the reality of ordinary life, grocery shopping and bills, and the thousand small compromises that make or break a relationship. But we know this. Love costs something. It cost Claire her classroom and her reputation. It cost me my mentor and my uncomplicated future. It cost both of us, our privacy and our peace. And we'd pay it again, because sometimes the most beautiful mistakes are the ones we never regret, even when they ruin us. Especially then,